Go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Japan Club's official podcast. I am your host, Yuki.
And I'm Gerry. Forgot Rachel's here.
We're just going to start again from the very beginning.
I think she forgets that she's here too. That's great.
Yeah.
You know what? Because we're authentic, we're going to keep this in the actual video.
Number two.
Yes, I am your host, Yuki.
I'm Rachel.
I'm Gerry. I'm supposed to be number 3.
Second to last, I'll be Bryce.
Well, everything here, in case anyone's ever wondering, all of our content is perfectly scripted. So that thing that you saw earlier, that was all part of our entertainment plan.
Yeah, we're not very authentic.
Yes, because here's what we're talking about this week is we're talking about a subject that requires quite a bit of levity because it's a subject that is very near and dear to our hearts. And that is gacha games, because you might have heard of them. If you're interested in Japan at all, you probably know a thing or two about this cultural phenomenon that's been basically around since the end of the beginning of the 2010s to the present day. Huge in Japan, picking up steam in the West, right? So I think that we're gonna try our best not to stay on topic here, but we're gonna do our best to make sure that we tell you guys, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, what the appeal is, what the kind of structure is, and why it might be important to consider. You might have a friend that might be deeply into this, and this might be like a PSA for them, if you want to.
PSA for them. Get some help. Stop it.
For only 5 cents.
All right. So you wanted me to get started with the history?
Yeah. Well, our resident expert, Gerry here, can
resident armchair research expert.
Yes, sir.
Fireplace sitting next to you, just pipe.
Fireside chat. All right. So gacha games, as we know it, started pretty recently, as you said.
Before we dive into the history of gacha games, we should first define what gacha games are, because we might need to make sure that we sort of start at that level. So before Gerry jumps into the history, let's first talk about what gacha actually is. So the gacha game is it's a shortening of the word gachapon, which is like a sort of chance-based rolling system. And there are many games that were designed based on the gacha game formats, right, in both electronic and in real life. Yeah. Sorry for interrupting you, Gerry. Continue, just so that they have.
I was getting to that.
I was flipping on pose. I thought.
So the name itself comes from gachapon, which itself is a physical machine. It's basically, those things you see near a konbini or anywhere. There's dedicated places for it, but it's like you put in a coin, you twist the thing, and the ball comes out. It's a capsule machine.
For those who don't know Japanese, konbini is convenience store. Just to be completely transparent for those who don't know.
Right.
Well, I'm just helping. My man just said something in Japanese.
Oh no, it's a shortening of a transliteration of an English word.
Yes.
But it doesn't make sense. Never mind.
Yeah, and the gachapon, I think, is an onomatopoeia for the noise it makes.
It does, yes.
Gachapon. But yeah, those existed. I forgot when they were invented, but they're still there. They're still in Japan.
Oh no, they're everywhere. There's an entire store in Akihabara which is just gachapon machines. About dozens of them. It's wonderful.
Exactly. And if you can't roll for the one you want, they usually have ones that just sell them for a higher price and everything. Same thing with crane games. So yeah, it's based off of that. It took the concept of a gachapon and combined it with a sort of other aspects into the sort of games we know today. And I take the example of games that already had a pre-existing loot box mechanic, like there are MMOs that already existed, and TCGs, both physical and virtual, that had this sort of thing of drawing cards randomly. And then I put social network games. The easiest example for Western people would probably be something like Farmville. These games focused on actually interacting with other players, but not as an MMO. It's on the level of I need help. Send requests, that type of thing. That sort of component is actually really important in gacha games. And so this sort of thing, along with, I said it's promoted by the growth of the mobile market. It really became prevalent when mobile gaming started to become popular. And of course, this was with the release of the iPhone, and especially in Japan. But this was, I think this is how Gacha games started. And so I'll skip around. The earliest Gacha game was Dragon Collection, which is exactly as what I described. It was basically a social network game, I think, under Gree, the mobile developer Gree in Japan. And it operated, I think it's from Konami. But it seemed pretty niche, but it had, I think, around 10 million players in Japan, which was like pretty popular considering. And after that, it just spiraled out of control because I think companies started to imitate that sort of model of Dragon Collection with Puzzles and Dragons. And I point out Summoner's War as a sort of earlier Gacha game that had the same thing, but I think you get the gist after that, how Gacha games developed. I pointed out 2012 as at least an important event in Gacha game history, in which there was this sort of article published in this Japanese newspaper about concerns about these Gacha games, connecting them with gambling and targeting children, about how they're advertised and how they're easy for anyone to pay lots of money for these games. I think there were 2 cases where these children, I think like in middle school age, paid I think over $1,000 equivalent yen in certain Gacha games. I don't know the specifics, but they were pretty well publicized. So they ruled that the complete Gacha model, also referred to as Kompu Gacha, was illegal in Japan under this certain law. I think created in like 1977 in terms of gambling. I didn't know about this either, but a complete Gacha was basically this model where if you rolled for these certain Gacha items, there was something guaranteed for having a certain set of items, basically. So maybe like plus 50% attack or something if you had like these certain characters or this armor set. I think that's how it worked. But that was basically under this law that you couldn't guarantee like extra benefits for a certain set of items, I think in terms of gambling. So that was ruled illegal in about May of 2012. And so of course this transitioned to a bit more friendlier Gacha models that are used today. I refer to them as like box gachas. So basically gachas with like a set amount of elements with known probabilities. The rates are usually disclosed these days. And of course there's a pity system, which is basically a guarantee of a certain item after a certain number of rolls. So you can actually ascribe a price to what you're rolling for, basically.
It's legally mandated for rates to be disclosed in almost all games now, I believe. I think in 2012 to 2016, that was not the case globally. In Japanese games or games that were operating out of Japan specifically, that was the case. But in global release games, which is something else we can talk about, the rates do not need to be disclosed.
Yeah. So after that, I just pointed out it's continued to grow. There is this sort of saturation of Gacha games in the market. You see a lot of games like pop in and out pretty quickly due to how you can really have to establish your a foothold, or else you'll just die within months.
Literally.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to keep the player base alive.
Nexon, anyway.
Yeah.
And then I put the transition to other platforms because this was basically a mobile-based industry. But of course, there are browser-based games. We'll get into that. And I think it's MiHoYo who really pushed the use of a PC client. They released a client for Honkai Impact III quite a while after its mobile launch. And of course, we can get into like Genshin Impact after that. But that's pretty important to know.
I think we should talk about Genshin later.
Yeah,
it's kind of big in terms of what it does. In terms of what it does for the Gacha game industry.
Exactly.
I would say. And what it means for people.
And then lastly, just this is still continued to be criticized, and there's still legal matters handled about Gacha games and loot boxes in general. But yeah, we're here.
After all that, the one thing that I think we need to just establish off rip is that this is legalized gambling, and there's no way around that. There's nothing. It's not necessarily wrong for that to be the case. There's nothing inherently bad about gambling, I would say, as long as you are responsible. But I think we need to establish, from the very beginning, that this is gambling, and that's the root of a lot of the problems that people have with the Gacha game market. And the root of a lot of the problems that you see when there's a scandal with a gacha game, it's usually somebody not realizing that this is gambling and then spending too much money, and then wow, look at me.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
one of the things that I don't think we covered is the idea that like for those of you who don't play, for those of you that play, you all have known probably most of this information, but for those of you that aren't really familiar with how it works, the way that gacha games usually work is that there is some sort of premium currency in game. And what you do is you can use that to sort of effectively roll the gacha, is the term you use, where you sort of pay the currency, get the chance to get whatever it is you want, whether it's a character or a weapon or whatever. And usually you can earn that stuff in game, and those people are free to play players. But then you have people who actually spend money on the game because we could use and purchase this premium currency with real world money. And that's where the problem comes in. It's like it's gambling, but with extra steps, because you're not technically paying money to get money. You're paying money to get a currency, which lets you get this virtual thing. So it's more like a service than it is a gambling. And I think that's part of why doesn't have that reputation of being gambling.
I
And
was gonna point
sometimes
out, this is similar to how like casinos quote unquote operate in Japan, right? They basically have, since gambling in general is banned in Japan, they get around it through like certain loopholes. So like casinos don't operate with money straight up. They operate with a sort of buffer currency with like tokens or something that you
Yeah.
can trade at like a convenience store next to the casino for actual prizes. Or I don't know if you can straight up like trade it for money, if that's actually a thing.
there's probably a pawn shop or something you could do it with, I would think.
Yeah, it's basically just the sort of medium exchange is literally just the same thing in Gacha with the premium currency.
Yeah.
So it's literally just gambling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even West.
And also they sometimes offer like skins or like extra costumes for characters, like
Yeah.
other services, it is like a fully developed game oftentimes, like in the case of like you see MMLs doing this as well. Like there's like a shop where you can buy like accessories and other fun stuff like that. Gacha games do the exact same thing. They're running a game. Like at the end of the day, they're running a game. So it's not always just the currency that they make their money off of, but that is the primary source of income. It's people spending money to roll the gacha and see if they get lucky or get that new pretty character or that new cool weapon they want to test out. It's the same as any other MMO that you would think in terms of like the fundamental mechanics of it, but it's just the way that the money goes in is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And so does that take us to the present day, Gerry?
I think so. Can kind of extrapolate off of that.
All right, yeah, because I mean, obviously, like Gerry said, like gacha games have kind of come and gone. I remember a time when those kind of Facebook social media games were kind of the big thing. Everyone was kind of doing them. Like Farmville 2 got released, nobody really cared all that much. And so you can tell where the hype kind of went down. And so there are certain eras, right? And right now we're kind of in the era of, I don't think it's gonna last much longer, but we're in the era of like a bunch of like these mobile gacha games that are kind of in that anime style, right? They're releasing a bunch every year, a bunch are getting localized. But I imagine it's one of those things where it's like a gold rush, where people see the market, but it's gonna quickly dry up, and only the big things will remain. That's what I think.
I feel like that's always been the case with gacha games though, because there have always been like these. How many games are hitting like their 7th, 10th-ish anniversary? Like I know Granblue just hit 7th. Dokkan hit 10th, I think. I don't know if that was global or JP. Huh?
FGO's on 5.
FGO's on 5.
But that's the JP.
Yeah, so like I feel like that's always been the case with gacha games, where there's always like a few games that are really big. Like Brave Frontier used to be huge, despite Gumi being a questionable company.
Yeah, but like I mean,
like there's always been that.
Yeah, but I mean more in the sense like most other game developers will realize like, oh crap, we can't really do anything with this. We can't.
No, but that's exactly what I'm saying. That's what happened. I feel like a lot of those games that were big ended up being those games that faded out of existence because other games that took advantage of the market better just took their place.
Because like I guess the parallel I would draw is that like it's like how nobody makes World of Warcraft clones anymore unless they're like in super
Confident.
Like nobody, like there was a time when like big game developers were trying to make the stuff to compete with World of Warcraft, and they just aren't anymore because they've realized you can't beat that game format. They've cornered the market, And I think that in gacha games, like we'll have the big ones, and then eventually other companies will just stop making new gacha games because they realize they can't beat Grand Blue, they can't beat FJ, they can't beat Genshin Impact, right? Like I think in a few years we're gonna sort of see this flood of gacha games kind of decrease. That's my theory.
There's also the issue of like, how consumers are constantly looking for like, like the newest, the most sleek game that's out there. So like a lot of the older gacha games as well, I feel like, because like some games like might not, update their interface, their play style to like suit current needs.
Mhm.
And that also leads to, it fading out of the public eye.
Yeah, like a lot of some games just aren't keeping up, and that can be problematic. I definitely agree with that. Let's see. We can kind of jump in easily into the into kind of gacha games as a specific, like we've already name dropped a couple, but it's also important to probably before we do that mention that none of this happens in a bubble, right? And so we should really talk about how gacha games have met the West. That's an important thing. That's an important part of the development because for the longest time, gacha games were kind of localized to the China, Korea, Japan area, and like
I kind of wanted to save that conversation for Genshin because I feel like Genshin's like the big tipping point for that, even though that's always been the case. But
yeah, but it's good to like probably bring this up just in terms of like to sort of let the audience know that like the West has only recently, relatively speaking, been hit by gacha games.
yeah,
And like you can tell this because of localization. A lot of gacha games have that thing where the original servers are way more advanced than the
Yeah.
new servers. And so there's this kind of gap that's being developed. And a lot of that is because most gacha game developers are realizing that there's a lot of money to be made in the West because the West hasn't been, to put it lightly, sort of inoculated to the gacha game format as strongly. Right? Because we have loot boxes in the West. We do. Like you play Overwatch or something, it's basically got gacha game mechanics in it. Because a lot of it's human psychology, We like when there's a chance to get something good rather than buying something directly. It's an addictive feeling that researchers have shown is like, it's kind of like, it can almost cause physical addiction in certain people. So we have that mechanic, but like gacha games kind of distill that to sort of the most
Yeah.
desirable thing.
Gacha games have it formulaically set up and can drip feed it.
Yes.
Better than loot boxes because loot boxes don't function in the same capacity as, at least not the exact same capacity as the way gacha works.
Yes.
Like I feel like people think loot boxes are more exploitative than gacha, which I find hilarious. In a sense, it is, but like not really. Depends on the game. We don't talk about EA. We don't talk about EA, but it's like we have an exposure to it, but I don't think the West on such a broad scale has seen it as subtly and particularly organized as it is in gacha games.
Yes, no, I fully agree. And a lot of companies,
Yeah.
a lot of like EU and stuff have reacted negatively towards some of these predatory mechanics. Gerry, what were you gonna say?
I mean, yeah, the mechanics in gacha are definitely more complicated and employ a lot more methods like, I don't know, increased rate ups and like step up gachas, those types of mechanics that loot boxes don't really imply or employ, because like loot boxes are really just, fixed creative items and you can like, oh, you have a chance to get like cosmetics and stuff. But I feel like gachas are a lot more deeper, a lot more subtle. That I don't think the legal eye has really realized the dangers of gacha yet, but over loot boxes.
It's also one of the reasons why, like, as we were talking about earlier, like a lot of gacha games haven't made it to the West because of all the regulations like about gambling. It's why like some games like Grand Blue Fantasy, like they prefer to just have like this like localized version and just English within the game instead of finding another publisher to do it, because that gets into a whole other box of legal issues that they just don't want to touch.
It also allows them to better control the game because they don't have to deal with the secondary publisher. they can just handle everything internally because side games is big enough to do that. But not all gacha games can do that. Side games kind of just built different. They actually just have way too. They literally collab with themselves. That's how big side games is. You literally say, "Oh, I want to do a collab banner." Oh, I hear Tanaka like down the hall. He's working on a project. Want to go hit him up for a new banner? Like, bro, it's literally, it's so ridiculous.
You're looking for the Princess Connecta division over there.
Yeah, like. Princess Connecta division's over there, bro. Like, what?
Like next to the Zombieland.
Next to the zombie, bro. When Wolfram hit that Zombieland collab, I'm like, bro, isn't Zombieland like right next to? All right, whatever.
Because they have a headquarters now in Saga, right? That was like part of it.
Wait, really?
Yeah, Side Games put a new headquarters in Saga, which is what they advertised through Zombieland. I think. Like, you know, those commercial in-betweens, there's literally a picture of the headquarters. Yeah. I was like, wait.
So, not all gacha game companies have the resources necessary to expand globally, but for the ones that do, it's a lot of work. And it's usually why you hear a lot of gacha game players talking about, oh, I'm playing global and it's like 2 years behind JP, but we'll catch up. Like, it's because there is an established
in your
server.
Dreams.
Yeah, in your dreams. I don't know. Arknight's kind of going fast.
Arknights is looking to catch.
Arknights is probably going to catch up.
Yeah.
But like, there's like a really broad variety of very distinct gacha games in the market. And even then, the ones that like you would think of as niche, like Arknights, for example, it's a tower defense mobile game. Like when you hear, like in comparison to a lot of the other games in the market, that's just very rare, but it's extremely polished, so people play it. Like it has a huge, I would say, fan base.
Yeah.
So like, despite there being like these very niche titles, like Granblue's a turn-based browser game, effectively, and it still has this huge, extremely huge and profitable market. It's been around for 7 years. Like we just hit 7th anniversary. FGO is the same thing, except it's purely mobile. Like it's not a browser. Granblue is built different. We don't talk about Granblue. It's kind of weird. They don't want to make it. It's weird.
Yeah.
FGO is like 5 years, like Yuki said, and that's technically turn-based. Really harsh gacha. A lot of work for what you get, for what you're trying to do. A lot of grinding, but like, despite all of these, I guess nuances, they still have these very devoted, very dedicated fans who are willing to spend money on their game and willing to support the developers because they want to see more content.
Yeah.
It's important, I think, at this point also to mention sort of how the actual gacha works. I'm a neuroscience major, so this is kind of interesting to me, is this idea of the Skinner box, right? Like anyone who's taken psychology classes will probably know about the Skinner box, because B.F. Skinner was essentially, he was a psychologist, and his interest was in trying to figure out what motivated behavior, right? Because one of the things that what fascinated him was like what causes people to make this, what causes beings to make decisions. And so he developed this thing called the Skinner box. And what it was a box where, I believe what happened was that if you I think it was a bird. If it wasn't, it was a mouse. But whatever it was, you press a button or pull a lever or something, a reward comes out, right? And he experimented with all sorts of things, because what he did was he did the very simple, hit the button, get the food, right? Because it started off with food. But then there were also variations of that, like hit the button once, and then once every 5 times, there will be food, right? But then he also did variations where it was hit the button any number of times, but regardless of how many times you hit it, the food will come out every like 15 minutes or something. And what he found were several things. There were several discoveries that he made with this. This is known as operant conditioning, and what it was is it's a way to determine whether or not you can motivate behavior, and it's contrasted with classical conditioning, which is about responses to stimuli. Operant conditioning is making decisions. Classical is responding to stimuli, right? And so what he found was that even if there was no logical connection between pressing the button and getting the food, as long as the animal thought that there was a connection, like if it pressed the button and then like 5 minutes later food came out, it would still keep doing it. So the behavior would still be conditioned into it. And second, a second thing he discovered was that of the kinds of mixtures that he performed, like, the kind where it's like, whether it's button related, whether it's time related, whether it's predictable, whether it's unpredictable, what he found was that if it was unpredictable, it actually caused the behavior to become strengthened. If you couldn't predict whether or not you were going to get the thing, you actually wanted to do it more. And that's critical to gacha games because they're all about probability, they're all about rates. And the third thing he discovered was that of the things that motivated the animals to act, food and water and all that stuff, that was like, that levels off, right? But there were other things that could, like, for instance, there was an experiment where scientists hooked wires up to the pleasure centers of a mouse's brain, and every time it pressed the button, it would fire that off, right? And it kept doing that in lieu of eating and drinking until it just died of starvation. And so in many ways, those ideas of the Skinner box of, unpredictable times, unreliable probabilities, of being able to, force people to keep doing this without it ever leveling off, all that stuff has been kind of taken into gacha games. And that's why so many people have a problem with it, is because it's turning humans essentially into lab rats, and it's kind of picking on their inherent, their psychological weaknesses to really get them to keep giving them attention, if nothing else, money, attention, whatever, right? And so that's the Skinner box in a nutshell. And I think the gacha games really are kind of just a fancier version of that, wrapped in everything, all this fancy fluff and stuff.
Yeah.
Just in case people were looking to sympathize with these gacha game developers or anything.
Like, I think a familiar tactic they use is masking, I think, the exchange rate between real money and the premium currency.
Yeah.
And like, I think when you buy certain like one of the packages that give the premium currency, honestly, the ratio is like different with each package in order to make sure that you can't really tell how much like a single of the premium currency is worth. So it's really hard to like ascribe a real world price to these without something like a pity rate, right? But
like, you'll never find the conversion rate for premium currency to real world dollars ever 1-to-1, because that would make too much sense.
That used to be the case in Grand Blue, actually.
Oh, well,
It used to be. No, they didn't change it for. Oh, it changed after the pandemic. Once that happened, the yen got screwed, so they kind of had to. Before it was like 3,000 and not 3,000. Oh no, yes, 3,000. 3,000 and to 3,000 crystals. But after like pandemic hit, the conversion rate got screwed with everything, so it increased like 3,150 for 3,000.
Darn.
Yeah, like nothing huge, but like it used to be basically a 1-to-1 ratio.
Mobile coin.
Mobile coin. Yeah, like side games just used Mobile Gate, which is a I guess an umbrella market that they can get people to pay through effectively to facilitate the paying process. They weren't necessarily being exploitative.
Yeah, like,
not to say the games aren't exploitative, because they easily can be, but I would say in terms of the currency, that's not what they're doing. They're playing with your heartstrings instead. they make you love their characters, so you want to give them money, as opposed to we want you to gamble more. How about you gamble more? Yeah, you want that, right? That shiny thing. No, get that. No. they're a little different.
I want the character.
I know this sounds like it's a biased source, but I try to be as neutral as possible when I make statements like this. I genuinely think that they are on the better side when it comes to treating their customers.
Yes, I mean, obviously, like, just because those we know about those psychological weaknesses doesn't mean that every gacha company is taking advantage of them.
Yes.
To an extent, they all kind of have to a little bit, otherwise, as a way to facilitate profits. But like, like, there are games that will kind of be like, whoa, away, you're doing things a little intensely. You sure you don't want to take a break?
Mm-hmm.
And there's quite a bit of that as well. And so, it's not all doom and gloom and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But that being said, like they're sort of moving on to the next kind of next thing we're talking about is there have been several controversies, especially in recent history, that
Uh-huh.
illustrate some of these. And you guys have way more experience on this than I do. So if you guys want to describe some of them, I can say my 2 cents afterwards.
I mean, I was about to say something about other things in Grand Blue, so like the segues perfectly. Like in like a lot of like games as well, like even if paying for a chance at something seems stupid to you, because it kind of is, if we're being honest here. Like even if that's the case, there are a lot of games who like do realize that like, the average person probably won't do that unless they have a lot of money. That's another case completely. But like, so like they have, like guaranteed packs, which is like, you can pay the set amount of money, you'll get a guaranteed item, and then you'll get like something else that's also like totally by chance. So like, you can get like say like pay like the same amount of money that you usually would pay for like 10 rolls of the gacha. You get like a skin and you get those 10 rolls. So like, that also plays on people's psychology because it's like, yeah, that's guaranteed.
Mhm.
However, at the end of the day, like it's still gambling.
Yeah, a lot of it's sunk cost is what it is. You get some good units, you're just like,
Yeah.
well, I guess I'm too deep in now. I paid money, I'm gonna keep playing, right? There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Sunk
And,
cost
like-
fallacy is huge in Gacha, by the way. Just for those who didn't make that connection. And for those who don't know what the sunk cost fallacy is, sunk cost fallacy is I paid this or I invested this into a specific thing and I can no longer pull out. I have to keep going until otherwise it is wasted.
Yes, it is the in for a penny, in for a pound syndrome.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
very powerful in Gacha. In fact, it's one of the reasons why a lot of people end up spending so much money. Oh, I've already spent 200 trying to get this character. Might as well go another 100. Like that is very common in Gacha games.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like that's even more of a problem when like gachas don't have pity rate mechanics or like spark mechanics.
Yeah.
Because like if we're going into controversies, back in like I think it was 2016 when like this shiny new character called Anchira first came out in GBF in Grand Blue
Granblue.
Fantasy. Back then Grand Blue didn't have what we now call a spark mechanic, which is where if you pull 300 pulls, which sounds like a lot, you will be able to choose one of these very cool, very top-notch characters, whichever you want. Like back then they didn't have that. So
They
like
didn't
when
realize.
that came
They didn't know it was that bad until it happened.
So like like when that character came out, like this one guy like spent like 4 hours on stream trying to get that character, and like he was like refilling his credit card and like like topping up his money like every hour. So I want to say I don't even know, but like he ended up spending probably over like I think it was over like $70,000 just to get that one character. And like that might sound crazy, but like stuff like this does happen. Even in like the game that Cygames just released last week, Uma Musume, like people have been spending crazy amounts of money on that already, and like it's only been a week.
Yeah, whales are crazy, bro.
So yeah, like that was pretty controversial back in 2016 because like no sane person would like the train of thought goes spend that much money on a browser game, but it happened. And after that, it's partially why Grand Blue Fantasy implemented this spark mechanic, which you now also see in a lot of other games.
Yeah.
And but like still like like I don't think you should see that as being like the company's taking pity on you, because like it also still goes, it plays on like the sunk cost fallacy. It's also like maybe you pulled like 280 pulls and now like you're all out of like like gacha currency, and you're just like, yeah, might as well go for like 20 more. So like that kind of psychology is still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, $70,000 is more than the majority of the United States makes in a year.
Yeah, some people are kind of just dummy rich. We don't talk about them.
Well, I know, but more so the idea of like it can get pretty bad if you're not careful. So if you're considering joining, it's a lot of fun, but trust me when I say you got to make sure that you if you don't have good impulse control, maybe either give it like give yourself some restrictions or just stay away.
Or just play a game where it's really easy to not spend, like, this is coming from someone with impulse control, but little probably comes off a little bit biased, but I think that it, like, this is also coming from somebody who's been playing Gacha for half my life. Oh, that's a problem. But I feel like you can identify, especially if you talk to people who like know Gacha games, who can identify games where like you don't really need to spend money. Like you have, like, when you get into a Gacha game, you have to like be willing to, unless you're trying to spend money, which that's all you, power to you. You got that. You got that. Spend your money the way you want. Just don't be dumb.
We call that free to play friendliness.
Yes.
And basically like generosity with how they give the premium currency for summoning. But,
yeah. But the main thing I want to say is be okay with not being literally the person with the biggest EP. Like you gotta slang that around, bro. Like you don't have to be the strongest person. It's
especially
like,
if multiplayer is not a big component of the game.
Yeah.
Like I really don't see a point, but you know, we call them, like, we didn't refer to them, but we call them whales, people who spend a lot of money on gacha games.
No,
people who just
them.
okay.
I know, and the guy, the Monkey Gate guy, the 70,000. I called him a whale, and it didn't.
All right.
I looked it up.
Explain it.
It's actually 6,000. The 70,000 is the FG. I think I was gonna afterwards.
Okay. I was wondering, that was really 70,000. I thought Monkey Gate was 10,000. I'm like, damn, 70.
I thought he could have. I don't think it would have been humanly possible to spend $70,000 in an hour. Just
no, it was 4 hours.
That's very possible, Yuki.
It's very possible.
I just mean, like, in terms of like how many times you have to actually do the gacha thing, like do the currency exchange, you just wouldn't have the time to both roll and buy 70,000.
No, you'd be very surprised. You just preload all of it and then roll.
I meant like from his standpoint, which was on a stream.
It's a slippery.
I know.
Slippery slope. It's a very slippery slope.
I'm just saying that have to be a challenge you set for yourself. I'm just saying, like,
speed running, going bankrupt.
I've definitely seen whales speed run banners. They get it down to a science. Their bank knows.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah. You all right there? He's like, I'm all right. No, he's not.
You get her yet?
One
more, chief.
Your credit card and is buying obscene shit, and it's like, well, you're half right.
Well, you're half right.
Yeah. Are you getting scammed?
Sending so much money to Japan. This obscure Japanese company.
Yeah.
There are games that aren't always like, give us your money. I think they all want your money, obviously, because they're companies, but there are definitely a lot of games where it's like, no, if you don't want to like spend a bunch of money, you don't have to. Just play our game, bro. We like having you around. Like,
yeah, it's annoying getting those internal advertisements. Like every time you log in, the stupid pop-ups where it's like, look at our deals. I'm like, no, just please don't show me this ever again. But like, it's always like last day.
It's nice. Like, it's nice to know. It's like, oh, that's a cool deal. If I like had that disposable income, sure, I'd buy that. Or like, hey, anniversary bundle, I might buy that. Right? I kind of got some disposable right now. I like this game. You know, whatever. Or like, it's up to you. Like,
very true.
Yeah, there's a line between supporting the developers and just being obsessively invested in this, like, in a game. So
and being
it's a very, it's not a blurry line at all.
Every 5-star.
Oh my god.
So
one of my friends does that. Actually, like, she's a super whale. I don't know how she gets that money. I don't know what she does for a living. But
Is she okay?
has every 5-star in Genshin C6 except for Shao, I think. Yeah, except for one. And she just got C6 Duluth when she was playing with Hutal. So she's built. Yeah, whales are different. I think she also pulled weapon banner. I don't know. Anyway, whales are built different.
Yeah.
Different species, and everyone acknowledges that.
That's why you call them whales.
Except for the whales. Yes. There's everybody else. I put my wallet in. I take my wallet out of my pocket one ton at a time. So
1 ton at a time.
So, a similar controversy that happened was when I don't think it was like a single incident in the same way that it was with the Monkey Gate scandal, which is basically what people sometimes call it. But essentially, there's this individual named Daigo who plays Fate Grand Order, which is one of the most popular gacha games. And apparently he, like a look at his records show that he spent about $70,000 total on gacha currency in this game, which, yeah, just sort of back to the previous discussion earlier, is an obscene amount of money. And it just goes to show that like gacha games can be very effective on certain kinds of people. And if you feel as though you have those kinds of tendencies, just don't play gacha games. Save yourself the financial burden of that, you know?
Unless you, for some reason, 70,000 ain't that much to you, which I mean, power to you.
Yeah, like
You
if
got to
you
teach me that strat. If you got that, you got that.
lottery and you're just like, you know, screw donating to charity because I'm a terrible person. Like you can spend
No,
all
it's good for it's good for your taxes actually. Still donate to charity. Trust me, it'll pay you off later.
point of donating to charity
Nothing major, by the way.
is for the tax rebate. Oh, whatever.
Well, it's not tax evasion, it's tax avoidance.
Different.
Is that better? Like,
No, yeah, it's legal. Tax avoidance is legal. Look, we're not here to talk about the American tax system favoring the rich. Let's just move on from that. We all know.
yeah, we're talking about
already.
gacha games favoring the rich. Like,
Yes, sir.
So moving on to the next point of discussion. Really, like there are lots of like it's like a subculture that's really developed, and even if you don't play the same gacha games, like the same kind of culture arises from it. This is one of the most interesting aspects of the gacha game kind of world, is this subculture that's kind of developed over the course of many years. And even if you've only got your foot in one gacha game, you'll get sort of the memes from a lot of other ones. For instance, one of the most popular, two of the most popular things that you'll find, and they're related to each other, is this concept of salt and this concept of rate up being fictional or unfictional,
Okay.
lie, as it were.
The desire sensor.
Yes, and
the desire sensor.
The desire sensor is probably the most universal gacha thing ever, because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what game you start in, it always ends in desire sensor.
because the
Yeah,
way
Rate
that
up, rate up is a lie too.
the way that most gacha games tend to work is that you don't just roll a gacha pawn and you get an equal chance to get any unit, right? Like there are different units of different rarities, and those rarities are sort of, there's like fixed at certain levels. The star system is very popular for this, 1 to 5 star, 1 to 6 star, whatever. The point is, one of the things that a lot of gacha games like to do is, instead of having all of their like 5-star units on just equal chance, what they'll have is a lot of rate up banners, which is what you call them, where there's a certain chance of getting these specific units at a higher probability within that, like say 2% chance. So like of the 2% chance you get the highest rarity, 70% of that will be this rate up unit, right? And because of that, there's this idea of the desire sensor, which is the concept where the more you want something, the gacha game almost tends to read you and says, we know you want this, so you're not going to get it. And then your friend sitting next to you who casually plays the game spends like 10 minutes on it and just started, rolls 3 of the units you want, like 3 copies of it in one turn because they didn't want it. So
Seasonal players.
yeah, so he's an old player, so give him crap, right? Like there's this idea of that, and people are naturally superstitious, so a lot of that is people conspiring, like, oh, I bet they put that in the game, or I bet there's like an age counter to see like new players get better crap, and like there's a bunch of stuff people accuse gacha game companies of because of this, and that culture is very much tended towards kind of pessimism and the self-awareness of the fact that we're wasting our time, but we still do it
yeah.
anyway.
There's what is
The
it?
old crew that Rachel and I used to be in would call her the grandchild of the developer, because she would get really lucky randomly. So every now and then she would like, oh, I got this thing. And it was like, oh, she hadn't been lucky in a while. So like, it's kind of understandable she gets something good. Like, nah, Cam, our grandchild. Yeah, you haven't code that for you, huh? Like, it's, yeah. Gacha players are kind of, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of superstition that comes around summoning. Because I know some people like always summon at certain times at certain locations.
They have like, some people have like rituals.
Yeah,
a
they
lot
do
of
that
artists-
shrine thing.
Yeah, they like make a shrine.
They
of,
do
like,
a shrine
stuff
and then put their like
dedicated
clone
to
on
that
it.
character, or they'll do stuff in game related to that character and then pull. Like artists will
Yeah.
always like draw the character they want to pull for and then pull for them. Like a lot of stuff like that. So those are
On a
very cool.
related
Yeah.
note, oh my god, I remember so I used to play another gacha game called Onmyoji, and like how the summoning for that works is like it's not just you press the button and it rolls for you. It's like you press it and then It's like you draw like something and then it rolls for you. So then people would develop like all sorts of superstitions, like what drawing what would make, you know, the chances higher and stuff. Obviously, like that's probably all bullcrap, but like, you know.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's just code, and what they usually operate on is, of course, RNG, or a random number generator. Random number generation in code is actually very hard to do without some sort of physical seed that's actually random from the outside world. They usually use stuff like noise, sound, or a picture. And I could see stuff like drawing or stuff like the current time being a sort of seed for the RNG, but I don't think it's on the level of, yeah, it can detect what you have. It's still completely random, but it just depends on factors that are outside of your control usually. And so, I know it's kind of silly, but you know, these things do exist. Like,
Yeah, no, that's true. And like, obviously one of the things that if you ever start playing, you'll recognize is that gacha games, when they give you the rate of certain unit rarities, that's an average. And that's never going to be the actual rate, because they, you know, that's something, like Gerry said, that's impossible to kind of predict even for the people who make it.
well, yeah, they kind of, some people who don't understand statistics like end up making false assumptions. Like, yeah, if it's the 3% rate, that doesn't mean you're gonna get 3 SSRs in like 100 rolls. It's an average, like across an infinite like pool, infinite pool or trials as we call them. And so you can't really make these sort of calculations without knowing what you're doing. And that itself, using confusing like statistical models is, I think, part of its predatory practice. I mean, taking advantage of these people who don't know exactly how they can predict what they're gonna pull and everything. It's yeah, like don't make your purchases based off of like, maybe if I have a 5% chance, I only need to spend this much more. No, that's not how it works unless there's like a pity system. Like,
yeah, that's why I always say, don't be dumb. Just don't be dumb. To me, that just sounds really silly to like, but people do make that mistake very frequently.
I see that discussion.
Frequently. Yeah. So just don't be dumb. Like, it's, again, we all play gacha games, like all 4 of us. So we might be biased. So it may seem biased. We genuinely think that these games are fun, but that's because we are responsible-ish. I'm not responsible-ish. I can't speak for Yuki. He's not questionable. I don't know. You FGO. I'm kidding. But it's because we know what not to do, because we understand that there are things that can be problematic with these games, so we just work around them. But there are things there are things that are enjoyable in them despite that.
Yeah, like the companies aren't holding a gun to your head to like spend money. So if you have that control, as long as you have that control.
Most of them. Some of them are kind of
all right.
Bro, Gumi kind of I don't like Gumi, bro. Gumi kind of abusive. I don't like them.
Yeah, I mean, if you could recognize the signs that like, yeah, they're kind of pressuring you to do something you don't want, like it should be easy to drop a game. Like, it should be.
It might hurt you for a little bit, but you'll feel better after.
Yeah, like I'm losing part of my life, you know, like,
If it hurts you more to play it, stop playing.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Or purposely get banned if that's what it takes.
Give away your account credentials to someone else. Sell your account.
Let them screw your account over. And like,
you shouldn't do something if you don't enjoy doing it. Like,
precisely.
Like, don't generalize that expression, because there will be times where you have to do shit, but like in gacha games, don't. If you're not having fun, you probably shouldn't be playing it.
Yeah, it's an entertainment. It's a game. Like, its purpose is to be fun. So if it's not fun, it ain't worth it. Like,
yeah.
Yes, precisely. And so, I mean, the next part really is just us talking about, some of like, this is more diving into kind of the deep dive into specific gacha games, really, because we've covered really everything that we wanted to about the general stuff of gacha games. And I think that you'll find that most of what we said will hold true for the majority of gacha games to varying degrees. And so really we can kind of we can tackle the biggest ones at this point, and we can start, we won't spend too much time on each of them, but we'll kind of like go through why they're appealing, and maybe, if you're interested in checking this stuff out, where you might want to start, right? Based on what you hear, we're not like all of us have biased opinions, but at the same time, we do love this part of our culture, and so if we have an opportunity to share what's great about it, we will, right? So, I mean,
All right.
do we just go in order based on what we have listed here? Because we could.
I think so. We can probably just do that.
All right, because I'm the only one here that plays FGO to an extent that
I used to play.
probably because Bryce flaked out
You
early
can
on.
comment on Fate itself.
Look, bro, I was so unlucky. I also didn't have the time for it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I didn't get lucky enough to even care about devoting more time. That was just a me thing. I still keep up with it, like what characters come out, what's happening in the game. Story was good, but I just stopped playing. Karen. Look, Delta hurt me.
The character I'm now saving my quartz for. So, Fate Grand Order is based off of a very popular visual novel / anime called Fate Stay Night. Fate Stay Night you might have heard of. If you haven't heard of it, you might have heard of Fate Zero, which is a prequel to Fate Stay Night. All of it set in the same universe. I'm not going to go into the details about that, but the matter is,
Go watch Giga's video for that.
yes, it's centered around
Which is read the visual novel. That's a recommendation.
yes, read the visual novel.
Yes, above all else.
Yes, it is very good. But
FGO is a visual novel, so
the central pitch.
if you like that gameplay.
You summon heroes, you summon like most famous individuals, heroes, and all that kind of stuff from the past, and you summon them as
or future.
Or future.
The Grail of Heroes is outside of time, my friend.
It's very embedded.
I hate how I get that now.
To the point where like most of the people who play the game are people who have like either watched Fate Zero or Fate Stay Night, and so it's a very dedicated fan base of people deep into the lore. It's one of those the appeal, I would say, is it's a very lore driven. It's a very lore and character driven product, and character driven is very common, but like the lore of the actual like story of the Gacha games. Gacha games have stories, and some of them have better stories than others. Looking at you, Fire Emblem, and.
Ba, 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 ba.
And
Gun.
it's definitely more of one of the interesting aspects is the lore of Fate Grand Order, and so there's a 1% chance of getting a 5-star with no pity system, and that is the most brutal part of the game. It is absolutely soul crushing in every way, and Fate Grand Order is famous for how unforgiving it can be when it comes to whether or not you get the unit you want. Now, there are crazy people out there who get like the 5-star within 20 or 30 pulls, not to brag, but there are also people who spend like thousands and thousands of rolls to get basically nothing, because one of the things about Fate Grand Order is that it's one of the older Gacha games, I would say. And it's probably, in terms of mechanics, appearance, and sort of how it works, it's the most outdated, I would argue, of the big ones. The gameplay is simplistic. The Gacha mechanics are from an era where forgiveness is not a virtue. And there are, all these kinds of things that can make it difficult for newer players to really get into it. So it's not one that I would recommend to people unless they already are big fans of the Fate properties. But I do love the game because I am a big fan of the Fate properties. And so, that's really what it is for FGO. Now we can move on to the one that all four of us play.
I know an FGO whale who's pulling NP5 on every single character in the game until the game stops operating.
Yes, and what that means is, and NP5 is just the FGO for having 5 copies of a particular unit.
Yeah, and it maxes out there.
So if you want to do the math on that, that's 1% times 5, except it's not actually 1% because it's 1% to get the highest rarity, but it's 0.7% to get the rate up, as we've described earlier. So it's actually 0.7 times 5. Oh no, it's the probability of doing that is like, 0.7, but you have to do it 5 times. So I guess to the 5th power.
Yeah. It's
over an infinite number of pulls though.
Oh,
so
that man has infinite pulls. It'll come out.
If you're getting them all in a row.
That's an average.
You're not getting them all in a row, so it's fine. But
I
yes.
watched. He pulled like 2 Mothmans in one pull. It was pretty funny.
Nice. Yeah, moving on, I guess, to Grand Blue Fantasy.
I got 2 Melties in one pull. That
Rather,
was, like,
moving on to
wildly
Psy
fun.
Games, because we
Yeah.
definitely play more than just Grand Blue. It's just Psy Games has so many properties. So
Yeah.
many properties.
I mean,
First property, the one that we all play, GBF. Grand Blue Fantasy.
Yeah, pretty decent, I would say. 6 out of 10.
Six out of 10, just like the rates.
I think the fighting game is better.
Never say, bro. Okay, to put this in perspective,
I'm just kidding.
Psy Games is so big, they made a fighting game, and their Grand Blue Whales and their Dolphins, like me, bought the fighting game and look at it like this. Hey, I got stuff for my mobile game with a free fighting game attached.
Yeah.
I think I'm kidding. That's exactly how I look at it.
I
got gotcha things with a fighting game attached.
We never actually went into the nomenclature on some of the things. So yeah, we should define some terms before we start diving into the terminology here. So whale. So one of the things that Gacha games have as part of their culture is this notion of comparing individuals to functionally sea creatures. The amount of money you spend is relative to the size of said sea creature. So dolphins.
Your minnows.
Free to play. They're not even aquatic, right? Like they don't qualify.
Yeah, they don't.
They're on land. Yeah, you're like a plebeian. But like if you're a dolphin, you spend some amount of money, maybe like $10-20 every couple weeks, that kind of thing.
That's
like
kind of generous. I thought that was minnow.
I
thought dolphin was like you're spending 30-50 every now and then, maybe 100 on occasion.
What's this gatekeeping over here? Like
it's not gatekeeping. It's just like determining. Okay, look. Usually, like there's small dolphins who are like 30-50 on occasion. You got the big dolphins like a couple hundred, and then the whales are like, oh, I dropped 700 on that last banner casually.
Yeah,
I dropped 1,000 on the next one.
Okay, it's a spectrum. But
it is a spectrum. I was saying like
we can't set boundaries though.
I'm not setting boundaries. I'm just saying what I have commonly heard.
20 versus 35. Oh, wow. Like
no, I said 50. That's literally double, and it's more. It's the frequency. It's not the quantity. It's the frequency.
Grand Blue Fantasy.
Like you could spend $10 like every day and be a whale.
Okay, it's based on how much a 10 pull costs. How about we just rate it on that? It depends on the game.
The point is, relative to other people, they spend a moderate amount of money on the game. Whales spend an obscene amount of money relative to other people. Like Bryce said, several hundred, probably like every week or every couple weeks. It's insane. But then there are people called the famous mythical individuals called Leviathans.
Not that mythical.
And Leviathan, well, I mean, for the average.
That big whale in like ReZero, it's kind of like that.
Bro, you have Leviathans and space whales. So they're just in a different dimension.
They spend thousands a month. Like they spend multiple people's worth of yearly salaries a year just on gacha games. And I don't know how they get that money. I bet they're just rich as hell, but like, those are the terms. Salt is what you get when it's a feeling of soul crushing despair
I think they know what salt is, bro.
Yes.
You ever been salty after you lose a game, bro, or lose a match?
Yeah, I know, but like
fine. MOBA and like Apex, that type of stuff.
Bro, that's a bit more popular.
Yes, salt is a pretty common thing, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know what our viewer base looks like. Maybe they don't know what salt is. Who knows? But the point is,
those poor souls.
All right, back to Grand Blue. So we should summarize it before we start diving into sort of what it does. Like it's a self-contained world/lore set in this place where islands float. It's called the Sky Realm, right?
Yeah, we're tempted to call it fantasy, but it's most of the times it's usually post it's in the disaster. post, but it has modern technology. There's like some it gets weird, dude. Like
Grand Blue has a lot of lore. Lots of lore, lots of internal storytelling, lots of character development. The appeal for a lot of people in Grand Blue isn't necessarily the gameplay, although it is nice. It's like that traditional JRPG turn-based combat. You have like a whole separate system for equipping yourself with an appropriate amount of damage and gear. It's not exactly a standard gear system because it's its own unique setup. I don't think any other game does this. We call it a grid. We're not going to get into what that means, but it has its own system for that. But the main appeal for Grand Blue is that very, I guess, thoughts or strategic combat system with the addition of, oh, we have these nice characters with fleshed out personalities and in-depth stories for the overall world. Our events are usually very well written. We have very well drawn art. Yeah, skins every now and then, and the community is very engaged. Like the voice actors for the characters are very often in like
They're high profile
official
anime
events.
seiyus, like too.
Like they're very high profile.
Yeah.
And like there's an anniversary stream in the next 12 hours actually for Grand Blue. And and these anniversary streams and our Christmas stream is often run by the seiyus, by the voice actors, in conjunction with the people working on the main team. So like it's very community engaged. Like, and the voice actors are also playing the game. Like there are running gags with the voice actors. Like one of them like has an obsession with a particular weapon called a Gisla. Like, it's a very tight knit community, and there's a lot of content for it. Like events outside of Corona, obviously. Merchandise. Like Cygames has a lot of investment in Grand Blue as a franchise.
And we need to mention that this is one of the few games that it's run in browser.
Yeah.
It's not a dedicated like app basically on your phone. It can just run through a browser, and I call it a double-edged sword. It's very accessible that way, both to JP and Ian, and to like from mobile to computer.
Yeah.
But I think it is held back because running an application as meaty as this in a browser can take a lot of resources, and I could see some performance issues, and like we could talk about how the UI is like really outdated. And how it's reliant on Japanese ping basically to be sort of like performing well, but otherwise it's really run well for what it is.
Yeah, and there is a mobile app for the game for those who don't know, but it's just like a browser.
It's literally it's a lockdown browser.
Yeah, I don't know how the hell it works. I just know it has an app. That's what I play on usually.
I like it because it removes the borders, but I think Skyleap is probably the better alternative.
Oh yeah, Skyleap's absolutely the better alternative. Yeah, that's why they released it.
Yeah. So, all right.
Next one, Precon. I don't play it, but someone in our crew does.
I play JP.
Okay, you got that. Yeah.
I mean, since the global was released, I think people would be more familiar with it. But the gameplay itself is pretty simplistic. It's more reliant on basically auto combat. It's like this thing where like the characters run across the screen and there's like enemies on the right, and they just fight with like basic skills. I think it's like has 2 buttons for like basic combat. The story, I think the production value is there. The story has animated cutscenes most of the time, and a lot of like animated sprites, so that's pretty nice. Other than that, it's pretty all right. I think it's long running as terms of JP as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many years, maybe 3 or 4. But as far as what I can say about it, it's pretty good. I mean, of course, all these games within the Cygames properties have collabs. So you see like the main character of Grand Blue is in this game. Either Monica from Grand Blue is in this game.
That can be Monica from Shadowverse, Rage of Bahamut.
Sure. It's a Hearthstone like situation over here. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. Cygames literally pulls characters from their old games into Grand Blue. It's pretty funny.
I mean, we can put Shadowverse on here, but like
yeah, Shadowverse is just Hearthstone, but run by Cygames and with other mechanics and stuff. Apparently a little bit more free to play friendly, actually, from what I've heard.
Yeah. All right.
Regalia Lost. This one might be a bit more well known by people, but this is a gacha game.
Even relevant anymore? I haven't heard anything out of it for like months.
It's still running. The hype kind of, I don't know how the community is. I used to play Regalia Lost.
Me too.
Because it's very casual. It's very easy to not spend money in that game, like hilariously so, because they just give away some, which is a common thing inside games.
They're really generous, and they decreased the cost for tentpoles.
Yeah,
they added quite a few quality of life changes. I remember when it came out, they used to have the mix between those like cards and like the dragons and
Yeah,
the characters all in
those used to
Gacha.
be, separate
But they
gacha.
removed, they removed the cards, I think.
Yeah,
as
they
part of
realized
convenience.
it was really bad.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, just farm it.
So
Pull for characters and dragons. You got that.
yeah, this was done in collaboration with Nintendo, I
Mhm.
believe.
Yeah, that's why I said it might be well known because
Yeah.
Nintendo hopped on it with side games.
And it's a pretty. The graphics were pretty good. They've had this recent update that made it look, in my opinion, kind of shitty.
Yeah,
But-
it's people are so like divided about that graphics.
Yeah,
change.
it's like 3DS graphics now. Like I thought.
yeah, it's like what, cell shaded or something?
Yeah, I thought it was better when it wasn't cell shaded, but
Yeah, I think
Anyway.
I mean, if it was a better cell shade, it might be. Anyway, very casual game, or at least it used to be. There's a lot
Yeah.
more high-end content now, so there is like stuff you can do if you like, progress farther in the game. There's a lot more complexity to it now than there used to be. In
yeah,
some
the weapon
respects.
progression is deeper than I thought. Like the raids and like how
It
you
used
like.
to be so much simpler.
Yeah, it's gotten
They-
into like World of Warcraft levels of like I think raid
It-
mechanics and like weapons development and everything. So
They realized that people wanted that, so they gave people that. Which
Yeah.
it's because the people who were spending money on the game, which I mean didn't really need to, really wanted excuses to show off all of their money. So they gave them stuff to farm and gave them stuff they had to actually work for, as opposed to like, here, you're done. Like they wanted a hardcore game in a casual game, so they had to deliver.
be like that.
But yeah, it's for a mobile game that's like 3D combat. It's actually pretty smooth. Very simple fundamentally, but like Gerry was saying, they added a lot of complex mechanics. There's actually stuff you have to obey. You have to know the fight. A lot
Yeah.
of stuff to it. There's auto stuff as well.
It's just the higher level stuff isn't mindless autoing anymore.
Yeah, like you actually have to.
over.
Yeah, if you have to like not die, like you
You
will
gotta
fall
dodge,
over.
dodge,
Bro, you have to be in the right spot at the right. Like you're actually doing raid content. Like it.
Yeah.
You will fall over if you are not prepared. I think there's also
Alright.
like enrage mechanics. That's FF stuff.
Overdrive.
Next thing, overdrive. That's from Grand Blue, but they put it in DL as well. Rage of Bahamut is, I believe, one of Cygame's first, if not their first property.
Yeah, I
it's
think it's one of the
also-
earliest properties.
Yeah, they pull a lot of stuff from Rage of Bahamut and put it in other games, like a lot of characters, a lot of enemies, a lot of alternative costumes for characters are pulled from Rage of Bahamut.
Yeah.
So it's a very like, well, I don't know how many people still keep up with it, but whenever people in Grand Blue or in other games are trying to figure out Cygame's next move, they usually try to see what breadcrumbs they leave and then look to see if there's something in Rage of Bahamut that they can pull from. And usually it ends up being accurate enough. For instance,
Olivia.
a recent Valentine's character in Grand Blue, Monica got her Valentine's version. And the reason people could predict it was because they saw Monica in a comic that Grand Blue runs, and that's usually how they identify new characters, is who was just in the comics. Cygame's way of telling us what's coming. And the way they identified what it would look like is they looked in Rage of Bahamut and found that, oh, she has a magical girl costume in Rage of Bahamut. This is probably going to be the next character. And then lo and behold, she's in the comic. Lo and behold, she's the next Valentine's character. So
She's also in
different
that.
trends.
That look is also in Princess Connect, and that was
That too. That was the other
Yeah.
thing.
yeah, it was released pretty recently, I think, in comparison. So
Yeah.
you know,
I forgot about that, but yeah, that was also
Monica.
Monica. Uma Musume, you all got that.
Oh yo, yo.
Y'all got that.
So this is hilarious. So yeah, this game came out recently, and it came out after the anime it was supposed to advertise, which is because I think there was like some delays or something issues. But the current season 2 is currently airing. I don't know about that one. But it's Horse Girls. It combines basically the two popular industries in Japan, of course, horse racing and idols. Not much to say besides that. But it's I played it a little bit. It's gameplay is similar to the Idol Master games, where you have to like raise your horse girl, and then she just competes in a race without any input from the player. And based on that performance, you get shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks nice though, like without my phone thermal throttles with it, but in like, but the graphics are actually really nice, animations, and overall, it kind of in lieu of like that Pokemon Gacha. What is it called?
Pokemon Masters.
Pokemon Master.
Yeah, it's like that. Like the in terms of graphics, like that much better. It has that whole 3D feel where you can look around and like there's the horse girls. Like anyway, I have a priority of like looking at graphics a lot, but that's over gameplay. But that's all I have to say about that.
World Flipper.
Oh, yeah,
Rachel and I play
Flipper.
this.
These games
Currently JP only, but there is a global release coming. World Flipper's probably one of the most casual gacha games I've ever seen and played. It's literally a pinball gacha game.
Yeah, it's pretty unique gameplay, in terms of gacha. It's pinball.
Yeah, and it's run by Tail, which is a subsidiary of Games.
Yeah.
So you see a little uniqueness in some things, the furries. Mild sarcasm aside, and it's only mild because there are a whole lot of them. They're very generous with what they give away. And you can tell that it's like a newer division because they made some mistakes early on, and as the game developed, they kind of got better about what they're doing. They're trying to release new content. It's only like a year and a few months old. Like it came out 2 Novembers ago, so November of 2019. But the game's still doing pretty well, it seems. New content's coming, new characters are coming. Like it's going along smoothly, I would say. And especially with the global release that they're planning and are translating for, so it's definitely doing well. And like I said, it's a very, very casual game and very easy to not spend money in that game. People do because the option is there. But I would say out of practically every gacha I play, it's very easy to not spend money, and be perfectly okay and still be competing with people who are spending money as long as you know what you're doing.
Yeah. All right.
One is, I believe,
So
Yostar, right?
Yostar properties.
Yes.
I recently got into that.
It's really good. So Yostar is a company that, it's like Games are a big company that's famous for making a ton of gacha games. The most popular one, arguably, is one of their more recent ones. Is because Azure Lane exists, and so is called Arknights. And Arknights is, as we've discussed earlier, is a tower defense game. It's set in this very kind of dark world where the writing is on point. Is what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
There's a lot of it's one of those, it's got an anime kind of aesthetic. It's got like a lot of different species of humanoid variants. And it's got this very interesting lore regarding this disease called oropathy, which is kind of like
The
it's a
stone
terminal
disease.
illness that you can get because of like impurities in your bloodstream. It's essentially what it is. But it's a really interesting story about sort of that and about these like nationwide conflicts and all that. But it's a very interesting tower defense game with a lot of cool mechanics, different unit types, and different ways to deploy them. It's very strategic. It's I would argue the depth of the mechanics is a lot deeper than the majority of gacha games that I've played. Maybe with the exception of Granblue, because Granblue's got a crap ton of mechanics. But it's definitely one of the higher quality gacha games that has come out in recent terms. It has really taken the gacha game culture area by storm because it's quickly risen to become one of the more popular ones. And it's still a lot of fun. So would recommend for anyone interested. It's a very easy place to start. Mechanics are very forgiving. The gacha mechanics are very forgiving because every 50 pulls, your rate of getting the highest rare unit goes sky high, and it's really, really good for anyone interested in just not spending any money, just kind of playing a game for the sake of playing the game. It's a lot of fun, and yeah, that's really all to say. Azure Lane.
I would say, in addition to what Yuki said, it has the largest degree of variance with like spending money and not spending money, in terms that there's really no need to, but like people spend a lot of money on the game because they set it up so that they left room for that. So the people who want to blow like as much money as they want can do that and feel a difference. But like at the end of the day, you really don't need to. It's very, very casual, very easy to play. There's auto stuff you can do, but like Yuki said, there's also harder things that are like, oh, clear this one time and get this extra thing or whatever. It's nothing like game changing or anything, but it's like usually like a very challenging map where you have to actually like figure out what you're doing and plan things out very meticulously. So
EX maps are so much fun. I just recently beat all of them. They're great.
bro, you need to go through and do all of them. I'm so lazy. I don't have time.
Anyway,
I still need to do the
roguelike.
roguelite event.
Oh, the roguelike is easily.
I hear it's really incredible.
It's easily my favorite game mode Arctis has ever released. It's incredible.
They also have a fun fact: a Rainbow Six Siege collab in the Chinese server right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
We didn't say it before. YoStar is a Chinese company. And Arknights started in China.
but it's all Japanese voice acting, which is kind of weird when you think about it.
Yeah, I found that kind of funny. Like, there's no Chinese voice acting. There are characters with names that I think are probably Chinese, but
Yeah.
Oh, Chen.
yeah. And another thing that I think is worth noting about the game is I feel like the developers occasionally make social commentary through what they do in the game. Like, it's very interesting the parallels you can see in terms of like what they pull from history and what they pull from what's happening in the modern era. So there's a lot that goes into the story and writing of the game. And the characters. The main appeal. Characters and story. Yet again, noticing a pattern here.
Also for Arknights, I think the UI is pretty excellent. Let me just comment that.
The UI is really smooth, I would say.
Yeah. It's one of the better examples of a game that, operates pretty smoothly. So we can move on to Azure Lane.
Azure Lane.
All right. I can give the spiel about that. So filling in the void that's left by really Kantai Collection. Comes Azure Lane, which focuses around ship girls. There are the girls ships, are the ships girls? I think it's the same thing, I guess. This is a game that I think focuses less on gameplay. This it takes the term like collection to the extreme, where you really are the point of this game is just collecting ship girls. The combat itself is like it's a scrolling where like the girls float on water and you shoot at enemies, but it's so mindless that you mostly play on auto, and it's really repetitive if you try to find any sort of variance in the gameplay. That the focus is either on the story, if you like the story, and just collecting characters. The good thing is that this is the most generous, really the most generous, not the most generous gacha, but it's really easy to get the highest like rarity ships that are like featured on Rate Up. I think it's like a 6% SSR rate, which is really generous. 7, okay. But other than that, yeah, I mean, there was an anime adaptation that was arguably, pretty mediocre. There's a current OVA, I think. But other than that, yeah, the designs are really nice and they're pretty distinct. I'll give them that. And they collab with a bunch of different artists that also draw for other gacha games, including I think Girls Frontline, which we'll get to later. But
yeah,
pretty good stuff.
Yeah,
ship girls.
Back in the day, if I had to levy any criticism about it, it's that like it's kind of a big time sink so you have to really kind of care about what's going on. Otherwise, it's difficult to commit a lot of time because there's a lot of like sub events and stuff you got to take care of and so
yeah.
on.
I forgot to mention that. Yeah, I think they're one of the few games that are speeding up their events to kind of sync with either the Chinese or the Japanese server or something like that. Most games don't do that. They just say like, oh, we have this permanent 2-year gap in between our like different servers. But I think Azure Lane's one of the few that like are trying to catch up with their global release. So
nice.
Good on them. I can give the quick spiel about Blue Archive because I think that one's YoStar's recent game I think is Blue Archive, and I only played a little bit. I don't get the gist of it. It's basically like this school that trains, I don't know, it's like mercenaries or something like that. And basically it is schoolgirls with guns, basically. It's been pretty popular in terms of, fan art, but it's questionable whether it's gonna like take off or anything. I think, I don't know if there's there's no news of any global, so it's gonna just remain in JP for a while. The gameplay is reminiscent to Princess Connect, except it's like 3D chibis running around with guns. And it's cute in my opinion, but it might turn some people off. But yeah, I really like the aesthetic of it. It's like a modern, modern city with girls with guns. So.
Not just Texas.
Yeah, and they have this cool anime opening, and the girls are literally buying like ammunition in a cone beanie, like as if you buy school supplies. It's hilarious.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, I ran out of M16 ammo. I gotta create some more of that.
Exactly. It's like literally a magazine with bullets. They're like, "Yep, let me get some real quick. I got to top up."
Oh wow, these are on sale. I've been waiting for 44. I haven't used it in forever. Gotta take it out of the closet, you know.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. All right. I guess we can. Girls Frontline is literally just. Oh yeah, we gotta talk about. We gotta talk about Fire Emblem. Right. Um,
I got that. It's fine.
just don't. That's my pitch. Like it's one of the examples of gacha games that has been criticized for being. Well, they don't really seem to care too much about their player base. Like if you're big into Fire Emblem, it's interesting to play. But one of the things that they like to do is they like to constantly. Well, they like to
Waste your time.
Make a bunch of moves
And
that
your money.
make money in the short term, and sort of release all these really popular units right in a row, over and over again, in ways.
Yeah, I think the big straw was well, I mean, but aside from they have this like problem with power creep. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Yes,
But
Yeah, directly, it's one of the biggest problems I have.
what is it? They had Rachel mentioned that thing where they sell bundles for like a guaranteed character, and like Fire Emblem did that for like the New Year's Fjorm and like that other character, but they were like $75 for like these characters, and I'm like, what? Like, what are you doing? So it was like downhill from there, in my opinion. That was like sort of a tipping point.
Yeah, like they keep releasing units that are stronger than every other unit they've ever made, which makes it so that you have to keep kind of rolling. And so
yeah, where these skills are like literally a Yu-Gi-Oh card description at this point.
Yeah, okay, so
It's-
that's the other thing. So
Yeah.
basically, this is a trend that a lot of gacha games take advantage of, where they develop a gacha game around a particular franchise, as you'll see in the case of Fate. Technically does this as well, but it's a better designed game technically. Fire Emblem Heroes does the same thing. Dragon Ball Dokkan Battle does that as well. Dragon Ball Legends does it as well, where they take a franchise or a series and make a gacha game around it and profit. And oftentimes what you see in these games, at least in my opinion, is power creep, because they want to continue milking the franchise. What they'll do is they'll release a particular character that the community likes, and they'll make them stronger than another character in that particular avenue and build content around that, and then do that repeatedly until the game dies.
Yeah.
So in the case of FE Heroes, the main issue that it runs into is that it lacks the strategic depth of Fire Emblem. Although there is another gacha game called Phantom of the Kill, which is one of Gumi's only good games, or consistently good games, that is basically just Fire Emblem, but gacha. Despite that, and Alchemist Code, which does the same thing, despite those games existing, they went with a far simpler framework and kind of just focused on, honestly, releasing content as opposed to like fine-tuning it, I would say.
Yeah, they've gotten to the point where there's like so many characters, and any semblance of balance, I think, is lost in terms of actually like trying to revive older characters. And I think a common complaint was that the maps were too small. And in terms of like actual Fire Emblem games, the maps were fucking huge. And they released a game mode that had a slightly bigger map, but it definitely lacks the combat depth that Fire Emblem actually had. I think Skill Inheritance was a good move early on, in terms of like fostering this sort of development of custom setups and everything. But other than that, it's a collector. It's transitioning to a collector at this point.
Yeah. And Girls Frontline is pretty much just girls with guns, basically.
Never heard that before.
The difference is the guns actually are the girls. So it's kind of like it's more similar to Azure Lane in the sense like a girl will be named like.
I mean, I don't think so. I think in the lore they're like tactical dolls who just become associated with the gun, but they have their separate like names and personalities underneath the hood. I think.
They are the guns for the purposes of rolling units.
Okay, yeah, but they it's their signature weapon, but like
basically in lore that's right. And so you wouldn't think
you are a A12, like
you are an A12.
You wouldn't think that would make for a very coherent combat military unit, but you know what? It just works in lore. I wouldn't think about it too hard. It's a pretty fun game. I stopped playing it a while back though because it just wasn't that invested in the story.
It does have the the unique summoning mechanic where it doesn't depend on premium currency. It depends on materials that you can farm in game somewhat. So I think that's a pretty nice mechanic. But
True.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we could talk about the elephants in the room.
And on to MiHoYo. So I wanted to save this for last because I feel like this is kind of really big. I don't know much about Honkai other than Genshin Beta. Great combat system, looks cool, a lot of time-based stuff. Really cool character design. MiHoYo actually does a pretty good job of that.
I can talk about it a little bit because I play a little bit of Honkai.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool setup. They have a PC client that was, like, as I said, released that performs pretty well. It is it's the combat is this sort of miniaturized combat system where it's like this 3D world where you just fight and there's like a dodge and an attack and like special abilities. And they added an open world sort of segment, which is actually pretty cool. But what MiHoYo does though is they have these like 3 to 4 characters that they actually feature in like across their games. Like Kiana, Mei, and Bronya were in this zombie game that they made before Honkai, and they just brought them into Honkai. And then Kiana, as you know, was ported into Genshin as that god you see in the very beginning of the game.
Most likely. Still waiting for confirmation.
It very much is. And Mei is probably suspected to be the Electro Archon, basically. But otherwise, it has a pretty good story and really deep lore in terms of events that happened. And Honkai are like the enemies, basically, of humanity, this chaotic force of evil that they're fighting against. And an impact refers to an event in which a Hersher awakens, basically. So that so the third impact refers to the awakening of the third Hersher, basically an individual imbued with Honkai that can defy laws of physics. So Kiana is known as the Hersher of the Void, and she does the cool block attacks that you see in the beginning of Genshin. It has to be Kiana.
Look, bro. I know. Like, for sake of, yes.
And they're actually connected. There's, I think it's called the Sea of something, in which in Honkai they peered into parallel universes, and you literally see the Valen from Genshin. So it's
Look, MiHoYo straight up told us and then showed us. Yes, we know they exist in parallel. It's fine. We're just talking about the game as
it's a good. It's a fine game. All right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's all you wanted to fuck. All right. On to Genshin. So Genshin is another game by MiHoYo, again, a Chinese company. A lot of people basically call it Breath of the Waifus because it's a gacha game, but it's Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
With its own unique combat system based on combining elements in a particular fashion so that you get certain reactions and certain effects. It's actually pretty fun, I would say. But the main thing I want to talk about with Genshin is that it really, in my opinion, is the first time the West really has had to contend with gacha games, because Genshin was not marketed as a gacha game really in the West. Although it was, like, for gacha game players, it was very clearly marketed as a gacha game. For a lot of people who don't have experience with gacha games, it's not, because it was marketed to be on the PS4 and on PC really heavily. And because that's what MiHoYo wanted to focus on. They wanted to reach a broader market. And as a result of that, this is the first exposure a lot of people have to gacha games, because it's free. Why not download that new hype game all the kids are talking about on your PS4? Like, why not? So it's the first time that a very large portion of the video game industry has had to contend with gacha game mechanics and like the system that it deals with. So I think that, like, the release of Genshin being this successful is related to that, because they marketed so broadly and invested so much into it. I think it, in like the first week alone, made honestly some gacha games entire development cycles worth of money. Like, it's kind of insane how much money like they've gotten off of this one game in such a short period of time. And again, like I said, I think it has to do with it's the first time any gacha game company's been this ambitious.
Yeah, it's the first time a gacha game has transitioned to these platforms to this certain extent, really.
Yeah.
Usually it's a port of the mobile game, at this, like, before that. But these were games dedicatedly, like, developed for the the PlayStation and PC platforms. You based on their experience with, I think, Honkai, because Honkai was like an ambitious project because it's a 3D combat game on mobile. Yeah. And Genshin is that too, but it runs questionably well on like lower end phones. But like, as you said, yeah, it fills that role that these people people who don't play any mobile games really and focus on like PC games still have this connection with Genshin then and have this exposure of what a gacha game is. And I think there's that aspect of like people who are unfamiliar with it are sort of more vulnerable to that mechanic, because I often saw, YouTube gameplay of like first episode, like, let me try out this Breath of the Waifu game. Second episode, dropping $5,000 to like get Diluc or something like that. And so like, it's interesting to see how this will develop, because if there's going to be a sort of competitor game to this on this sort of platform, but I don't see any other companies developing something as ambitious. So they really have free reign until something else comes up.
Yeah. Does that cover?
So
where'd Rachel go?
that covered. Sure,
Yeah,
computer
where
died,
did
I was
Rachel
about
go?
to say. Her computer kind of just fell over. Whoops.
Hopefully she but the show must go on.
No, like her computer actually just like died, so I wouldn't
geez.
worry about it.
Okay, well,
Like it's out of power. She didn't have a charger on her.
okay.
What?
Well, we will have to wrap up this conversation pretty quickly though, because we've covered all of the major points. So really the last one about the fact that sort of the West is now really having to contend with these gacha mechanics in a way that Japan has kind of been dealt with for many years is going to be a cultural phenomenon that even if you don't play gacha games, you might want to keep an eye on, right? Because it could lead to a lot of changes in the legislature. Think of how like this is an example of like how the whole idea of advertisements in TV, right? That's not really a thing. That was a thing America did a whole lot, but then like when other countries started getting like pirate television networks and stuff like that, that sort of flood of advertising kind of had an impact on people who weren't used to that. It can cause people like it's hyper. It's kind of like invasive species in biology, right? Like hyper refined things localized when they're moved to a new area can kind of infect a vulnerable population before they even have a chance to really respond to it. So, we'll see if the West is able to kind of keep their wits about them. They've had loot box mechanics for a while, but like those have been tangents to the actual gameplay. So we'll see if that's something that they'll be able to deal with very effectively, right?
Yeah.
Well, sorry to end on a downer for everyone who was listening, but gacha games are a lot of fun. Trust us. Despite everything we said, as long as you can kind of, it's like performing. It's like extreme sports, like if you get over some of the risk factors, it's a lot of fun, and you can kind of enjoy yourself and find that niche.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think communities are a big part of it though. Like,
Yeah, definitely.
so, the part of the enjoyable part of the game is, people connecting with people who also care about the story, the characters, and with that social connection, comes an enjoyable experience. But if you're wallowing in despair by yourself, I don't think the game's for you. Like really.
So some final thoughts. Just give them a try if you're interested in anything we said today, and if you feel as though
they're free to play, free to start.
They're free to start.
Just watch out. Watch out.
Yes, be careful.
You can play gacha games without spending $1. Some at least.
Like there's we call it the honeymoon phase, really. Periods of games that usually starting out that start giving out free crap to new players. But you got to be aware that dwindles down probably after the first week or two. So.
And even if it dwindles down, you have to kind of get used to like the pull cycle, so to speak, like how often you can pull, when you should be pulling if you're free to play, like.
Or if you find out the game's not for you,
or if you find out the game not for you, drop that.
Yeah, your trial period is over. Like
your trial period is over. I don't know.
What? You never leave, right?
there are some games where you kind of just can chill. Like I feel like Granblue is one of them. Really don't need to spend money on Granblue, to be honest. Pretty sure almost everything I've gotten in Granblue has been cosmetics or guaranteed things. Like I've never paid for pulls specifically.
Yeah, like the scamcha ticket is kind of a.
No, I take that back. I buy some of the good scamchas on occasion.
Yeah,
not I don't buy the elemental ones.
All right. But yeah, the cosmetics and stuff that's like guaranteed. Like I do like what's the pick ticket or whatever, like
sub ticket.
Sub ticket. Those are pretty nice.
And anniversary ticket coming up soon.
Basically, yeah. That's how I got the Christmas Narmaya or whatever. But
All
I
right.
don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do with my anti-ticks. Anyway, moving on.
Yes. We hope
Yeah.
that this has at least been enjoyable and informative for those of you that haven't learned anything or that haven't learned much before about gacha games. We've talked about the big ones, talked about why they matter, and about what their kind of their whole shtick is. And I hope that maybe if you have a friend who's suffering from a gacha game addiction, you could send the word out, let them know that you're gonna join them in their salt. Not the message we want to encourage. We're kidding, but the point is just try to moderation and have fun. And I believe with that, I think we're done, and we can see you guys next week. Peace out.